Hey, what's going on, loungers? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Mason T, and I am a 20+ year importer and product developer. So today we're going to be talking everything about the current tariff situation, and I feel as if my perspective is more important than ever right now because this is specifically what I do and what affects me the most. So I'll be getting into the whole, nitty gritty in the background. We're going to be doing some rabbit hole dives and stuff like that so that you really get to see it from my worldview. But before we do that, I just want to put out there that there's no way of doing these particular videos without actually getting political. The country right now is so divided because of politics and stuff like that, but truly I believe that everybody is inherently still good people, and there is traits between all of us that are from actually both sides, right? So I want to show you guys, a couple of the qualities that I stand for first, so that you can see that when I talk about stuff, I try to come down as much of center as possible with an independent thought that is more favored towards what business is, because ultimately business is what affects us the most because it's how we eat, right? So I'm just going to jump right here, and then we're going to talk about a couple of values first, and then we're going to get all into about tariffs, right? So number one, personal responsibility, right? This is more of a conservative value. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, own your own actions and their outcomes and stuff like that. This is very important because taking accountability is what allows you to remain within options when things happen. When you play the victim, when you blame other people, it's all their fault, they're out to get me, you know what I mean? You actually restrain yourself from different options because there's nothing you could do about it. But if you take accountability and then you jump the gun to like, maybe there's something wrong with me, what is it that I did and stuff, then there's something to go on. You have leads, you have options to, change what you're doing and stuff. So you're more in control when you take accountability than when you blame other people. So the next is empathy, right? Which is more of a liberal value. So understand and genuinely care about the struggles of others. This is exactly how this and why this channel exists. It's because I've seen and read all of your comments. We did that on Sunday, and not to be dismissive of what other people are feeling, right? And to try to understand exactly where they're coming from. This is what the empathy side is and why this channel is even here. So discipline, conservative, right? Prioritize long-term success over short-term pleasure. This is just self-explanatory in itself, right? We have to prioritize for the future. That's what saving up for retirement is. That's what investing is. That's what growing a business is, obviously. And then innovation is actually a more of a liberal thing, right? Because even though more conservative value is more like, let's not reinvent the wheel, traditionalism and stuff like that. But you have to come at this from a more liberal approach when you're talking about innovation, right? And challenging the status quo so that we push beyond how it's always been done and to find better ways. That's how we offer more value into the marketplace. So you have to have a combination, of both conservative and liberal values in order to really do business. And I feel as if the more people can understand that, the more the country can heal and come together and just, realize that we're more alike than anything else. So let's just go through the rest really quick, okay? So work ethic is more conservative, open-mindedness is more liberal, accountability more conservative, adaptability more liberal, stewardship, which is, protect what's entrusted to you, whether it's land, culture, resources, your property, your family. These are the priorities that you put first. I feel as if we could all agree with that, right? Family first, right? My property first, things that belong to me, things that I earned, right? And then social responsibility, a very liberal trait, right? Recognize that your choices impact more than yourself. We need to be mindful of others when we go out and do things. Okay, with all that said, let's jump into the video. All right, guys, we're going to do a little watch along with Kim Iverson. I don't know if you know who this lady is, but she is down the middle, in my opinion. I watch her stuff sometimes, and I think her thoughts is very independent, right? She's critical of both sides. So let's give a watch of what she has to say. I know this video is very long, but it's very important, and that's why we're doing a two-part series. This is part one, and then we'll do another one on Tuesday, part two, and then we'll get back to normal scheduling.
Are we going to win the trade war with China? No, probably not. I do want to show you guys some videos of what's going on. First of all, China is not planning on backing down. Watch this.
China is fully prepared to fight to the very end because the world is big enough that the United States is not the totality of the market in the world. So if the United States wants to go in that direction of completely shutting itself out of the China market, be my guest.
Yeah, and China will lose the US market, which, as I've said, is 15%.
We don't
You
care.
can't.
We don't care. China has been here for 5,000 years. Most of the time, there was no United States, and we survived. Right. And if the United States wants to bully China, we will deal with the situation without the United States. And we expect to survive for another 5,000 years.
When you hear
Yeah, but let's not, I don't like to just randomly throw out this whole like 5,000 years stuff or whatever, because, you guys know a little bit about Chinese history, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, feudal China and stuff like that. Like it was chaos back then, right? Before China was fully unified. There has been famines and stuff like that. So, everybody experiences times of hardship. So I don't want the narrative to just sound like, it's been 5,000 years of prosperity, because that part is not true. But yeah, I feel as if right now both countries are posturing. That's why I didn't really do, the tariff stuff until like so many of you guys requested. I think I got about like 20 requests on tariffs. Now, the thing is that like I think people are posturing, right? Because it's crazy right now. It just went like, oh, we're gonna do this tariff, we're gonna do reciprocal tariffs, and then it went back and forth, and then one side said, well, we're gonna do 100, and then the other was like 200 and 300, and until finally China's like, you know what? Just keep going up with your tariffs. I really don't care, because whatever tariff that we set at like 125% already, like nobody's going to buy American goods anyways. There's no reason to go any higher. And that's what's actually happening right now. Okay. But let's get more into it so that you get more context.
Hear Donald Trump say China wants a deal. It just doesn't know how to go about it. They're proud people. J.D. Vance talks about Chinese peasants. What do you make of their conduct in this respect?
If J.D. Vance thinks that he's dealing with the peasants in China, and I'm proud to be a descendant of the peasants, most of us are descendants of the peasants anyway, that's our tradition. We are farmers before, but now we are one of the leading industrialized economies in the world. So I'm sorry, J.D. Vance doesn't know what he's talking about. And therefore, I don't think there will be China-US dialogue unless the United States changes its attitude towards China.
I am human, and it's not like I've never been affected by these kinds of words before, right? But that's when I was much younger, right? The more I do business, the more strategic we get, the more, collected and calm we are about stuff, right? Words that are, racial slurs or nasty things that people say to you, mama jokes and whatever, they're all to throw you off your game, try to incite some kind of reaction, you know what I mean? So that like, you have a difficult time handling the situation. When you really think about what JD said, okay, I think it's just a move. I think it is theater, if you ask me, because his wife is from India, so to just, like shame on other Asians, and to like, I think it's, dare I say it, a little bit scripted, so when he said what he said, I'm like, I see, this is, it's not gonna make good optics, I'll tell you that. But I also don't think that it's meant, the agenda behind it is what people think it is, right? I don't think it's just flat out racism, like it's that simple. That's too simplistic of an explanation. I think it's more continuing with the theater and the posturing and stuff.
Deal with China as it is. Show respect to China.
So that's why I didn't wig out when he said it.
And don't try to impose your prejudice and biased view about China or about the rest of the world.
Don't be prejudiced.
Okay, so we'll break that down a little bit, but I want to show you more of what is happening online that is making a ton of waves. There is this bag guy. There's a rumor now that the trade war between the U.S. and China has caused China to lift its what they call this.
I just want to say real quick, guys, don't ever let the trash talk phase you. Okay, don't ever let that, knock you off your pedestal. All right, if you're making a point, you're making a solid point. People say those things, those ad hominem things, and whatever to to shake you up, and don't ever let that happen.
a secrecy clause, which kept hidden which luxury brands or which items were manufactured in China, even though a lot of these brands have slapped on them, like made in France or made in Italy. And in fact, some are saying, no, this stuff is actually made in China. Now there's this huge trend happening on social media where this is being exposed, where these Chinese nationals are walking around their factories and saying, we're
you
actually
guys
the
have
ones
seen
who
this
make
guy,
all of
right?
this.
He's
and
like
the whole
all
point
over
of that
TikTok.
is to say, you thought that you could get away from basically everything's made in China, even the luxury brands that claim they're made in Italy or made in France. It's all made in China. And the tariffs war is going to hurt practically anything and everything that you purchase. So here is this famous bag guy that has been circulating over social media.
This guy on social media has kind of sort of positioned himself as the the ghost producer of like Hermes bags and other high-end bags and stuff.
And we had to edit this out, and I'll show you why. We did have to edit the brand name out of this video, and I'll explain after we watch this.
Some say as long as there's a tag saying made in China, the bag can never be luxury. However, in fact, more than 80% of the luxury bags in the world are made in China. But those luxury brands just won't acknowledge that. They take almost finished bags from China factories back to their own factories and just do the repackaging and logo installing, something like that. That way, the bags will appear at their boutiques as made in Italy or made in France. Those sophisticated European countries, which make you feel mysterious, royal, and thus luxury. Now, close your eyes. Let's just do a little very easy experiment in your head, okay? Imagine that you have a bag and suddenly the label on it changed from made in France into made in China, while everything else like leathers, zippers, and hardware remain the same. Do you suddenly feel that your bag is not as luxury as before? If you do, that means you have been misled and poisoned by the market campaign of those luxury brands for too long. Welcome to the real world. Now you see, those bags are made in China by our intelligent and diligent Chinese artisans. Let's not be poisoned and misled by the market campaign any longer and be a real person. Buy a bag from us, from our factory in China. See the real world for yourself.
Okay, so the bag designer on that one was should I say it? Should I say it? Am I going to get in trouble? Let me actually read for you this what happened. This is an Instagram warning of somebody that they've had their account now suspended. He says, my Instagram was suddenly suspended without any warning due to a video published about luxury fashion goods being produced in China. Hermes Paris are the reason it got suspended permanently. I have no access. And the Instagram warning that he received says, we suspended your account because we received a notice from a third party that it infringes their trademark rights. The video was titled, China isn't just flexing its industrial muscle, it's flipping the script. Through slick expose-style videos, it's winning the tariff war of narratives, not with tanks or tariffs, but by dragging luxury giants like Hermes, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Prada, and Chanel into the spotlight. It's not just a clapback, it's a masterclass in soft power, calling out Western excess while manufacturing the receipts. And so we made a video and that got ripped off the internet. And the next warning over there saying, we removed your post. Why did this happen? And it says that it was actually done by Hermes. It says the owner was Hermes International. And so basically Hermes is cracking down and saying, we're removing these videos. So I guess I'm taking kind of a risk by showing this. But I also want to play this video for you. This is Hermes saying, hey, no, we actually do manufacture all of our goods in France. This is not real. We're made in France. I think it's a 60 minutes. Made in France.
I saw this video.
They're lying, and this is just a way for these replica manufacturers to sell bags.
I have the footage too.
And when you get one, you'll see how cheap it is. So this is a little bit of, this is from about 11 years ago, Hermes opening the doors to its factory, showing that this stuff is made in France, but pay attention.
I think the pleasure to share is bigger than the willingness of hiding. So we decided to open our doors and to show exactly who we are and what we do. Hermes started as a saddle maker in 1837. And we are using the same techniques 180 years later to make our bags. It's a good opportunity for us in Festival des Métiers to show what we are doing and why it takes so much time.
How important would you say the fact that Hermes is made in France, or even better perhaps, made in Paris? How key is that?
It's not lost on me that I'm watching her watch a video.
Because we have different locations. For example, the silk is in Lyon. And why in Lyon? Because by tradition it's the best place in the world to print the silk. And in France we have this long tradition of know-how, especially in leather craftsmanship.
Okay. So he goes on to say, you know, it's really important that this is made in France. It's a tradition. But I want you to pay attention to that video. You notice that you did not see rows and rows of bags being made. This is not mass production. And what the Chinese counter now to this is that, yeah, your stuff is designed in France or it's designed in Italy. You know, these are the designers. They're sitting down. They're really crafting it. They're getting those materials. They're making the initial bags. But then when it's going into mass production, it gets sent to China. All of the materials are sourced from China. They then mass manufacture the bags. The bags then go back to France or Italy or wherever. And then the bag manufacturer or shoes or whatever it is will slap on the labels. They'll do a few of the finishing touches, the packaging, the labeling, and then it can be say it was made in France or made in Italy.
Have you guys
when in
ever
fact
heard this
it was
before?
actually made in China. And I think that the reason why China is exposing this is to counter the narrative that Chinese goods are crap, that they make cheap stuff. It's not good anyway, and it doesn't matter, and you don't want it. And China's saying, actually, you're buying our goods. You're buying them at, I mean, a Hermes bag, by the way, is like $30,000. It's outrageous. It's totally outrageous. But, you know, you're buying these luxury goods and they're actually made by Chinese craftsmen. And when you actually stop to think about it, who would make these bags anyway? I mean,
Okay, so I'm going to pause it here a second. I want to show you this clip. Okay, so this was the 60 Minutes clip that was in response to China.
Hermes is built in villages and towns all over France. This is one of them in Tourne, a 3-hour drive from Paris in the French countryside. The workshop is quiet. There is no jamming of sewing machines, just artisans performing a silent dance with dueling needles. The morning we visited, we met Amandine and watched as she put the finishing touches on a Kelly, the most difficult bag to build. It starts with 30 distinct cuts of leather and can take 20 hours to complete, 4 hours for just the handle. There are no manuals or cheat sheets. Artisans rely on their training and muscle memory to make every bag.
Which bags do you know how to make?
As we go on with this particular video, I just want to zoom it forward. What ends up happening, okay, is that there's no confirmation whatsoever in this video that they have made the bag all the way through by themselves. And this video actually got destroyed in the comments where people are like, this video basically even confirms that, you know, the rest of the 20% is done by Hermes and the first 80% is actually done in China. So whether you or not you want to believe this is up to you. But what I'm trying to say is that the evidence is kind of compelling. Okay, so let's come back to what Kim had to say, and then I'm going to show you the rabbit hole dive stuff.
Who in France, the West is industrialized now. It's, you know, moved on from the industrial era. We're now in finance and all of these other things, and a lot of Europe is tourism. Who's making these bags in France? Like, do you think that there are French people that are sitting around in factories actually making bags? Or is it, if they do have factories of people making bags, it's probably the immigrants coming in from Africa who would be sitting down in those factories making the bags. But places like France, Italy, you know, really Europe in general have extremely robust hiring, you know, really robust employee rules and regulations. They have high wages. Everybody gets free, you know, healthcare, education, all of these things. So it's not likely that the stuff, when you just think about it from a logical perspective, although you could say, well, yeah, but a bag's 30 grand. So, I mean, if it's 30 grand, maybe they actually are manufacturing it using French nationals who are getting free medical care and, paid for education.
No, the issue isn't that, right? The issue is the infrastructure of training your employees, right? So if you're talking about like, French artisans and stuff that have, 10, 15, 30 years experience making these Hermes bags, that's what you want people to believe. That's the prestige you want behind it. What China is saying is that you'd be surprised how fast China has picked up the craft and the prestige to that they are able to handcraft at the same, quality as a French artisan, like back in, in the 1970s, 1960s or something like that. Now to say, that they're African immigrants in Europe and whatever, that would require you to put the education in there, right? You would have to go ahead and pick up these immigrants and put them under apprenticeship, right? Apprenticeship. Yeah, sorry, but you know what I mean. You have to take them on as an apprentice for years before you do this. And China is saying that we are already doing that, and the work has already been outsourced to us.
Education and all these things. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could assume that, certainly, but profits over people, I think, always motivate the West, and it's highly unlikely. When we just look at the facts of it, it's highly unlikely that they're being mass produced in these European countries. It's most likely they're being designed in those countries, shipped off to China for manufacturing, sent back to the countries for the finishing touches, and then sold to us at enormous hikes with enormous price
I personally
hikes.
Believe that too.
Another video that is circulating around right now.
There's little evidence of a trade war at the Jiahao Flag Company in Anhui Province. Workers bustle and sewing machines hum.
Yeah.
A current hot seller, blue and white.
See, you see what I'm saying? It's not left or right. It's hot seller. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't matter if you're for or against. This is what the hot seller is, right? It's all about the money first, the profits first. So they'll make whatever is required to make, right? Okay. Had, Biden and Kamala been selling a lot of merch, then they're going to make a lot of merch for them. If Trump is making a lot of merch and people are buying it, then they're going to be doing that.
Banners declaring the centerpiece of Trump's re-election.
So this is an older video,
it's
but
less political
showing
than
that
people
even the
think.
Trump merch for his campaigns have been made in China. So this is also circulating around right now. And China now has even created an entire new industry around the tariffs. This is a woman speaking about how you, as an American consumer, can get around the tariffs.
How do we profit under a 145% U.S. tariffs? Smuggling? No, a safer and more legal method than smuggling. Personal shopping service. You can travel to China, act as an agent to purchase products for your American friends and clients, and then avoid that tariff by declaring them as personal items when you return to the U.S., thus earning a high profit margin. Want to learn more? Follow me. I'm a Chinese freight forwarding agent. For more details, please visit GoNest.
Okay, I have a little bit of an issue with that because that's you coming in with like personal customs and stuff and will they all that stuff, right? Okay, that's a little bit different. If you're a freight forwarding agent, you're talking about like commercial goods, LTLs, stuff like that. You know what I mean? For me, the storyline kind of sort of doesn't match, but there is a particular video that I really, really want to share with you guys that goes into the rabbit hole of this whole bag creation stuff. I know Lindy did this story, but this is what Lindy didn't cover. Do you guys know this man? This guy is Tanner whatever. Okay, the point is that he was a maker of this stuff. Okay, so if anybody is the authority professional on the technical stuff or whatever, it would be this guy. And I just want you to hear what he has to say. Actually,
TikTok trade wars. So it turns out there is another trend going on, and I'm not aware, as I'm off news and social media for 5 years now. But regardless, I got so many questions, I had to do my commentary.
For a real quick background story, this guy has 1.2 million followers just on crafting. Okay, so and this was 5 years ago. So this guy has really made a name for himself. I trust what he has to say.
On a family trip, that I'm in Barcelona now. So I watched the main video where the guy breaks down the cost of a Birkin.
So now to sum those up, the total cost will be 1,400 USD for one Birkin out of factory.
For a $38,000 Birkin. And this might surprise you, but his cost estimate is too high. And there are other inaccuracies in his original video. So let's break down that video and point out the accurate and inaccurate information in his video.
You guys know I'm loving this portion because this is exactly what I do. This is exactly the type of videos that I make. I mean, you know, I'm a little more cheeky about it in my videos, but yeah, ultimately, right, it's very important that we'll, you know, when we go through the learning process, you hear it from an actual professional who has done more. And, you know, you just hear the reverse breakdown so that you know what's what.
He starts with listing the materials and the costs of it, and he shows a leather that says Togo, but the leather there, this leather, is not Togo. The second thing he says is true. The material supply chain, everything is available in China. Yes, that is true. A lot of Chinese buyers drop $500,000 on one leather shipment in European tanneries to buy real Togo to make counterfeit bags. That's true, leather is available, but most of the counterfeits in China doesn't use that real leather, and you know, those tanneries can't even make that much anyways. Then he says
one piece of Togo leather, the same leather as this one, will cost 450 USD.
That's not true. The Togo from Weinheimer today costs about $330. On average 22 square foot at 13 euros a foot. You do the math. He says another true thing about the stainless steel, the ocean steel hardware.
The hardware. See, for one piece of bag, the hardware will cost 150 USD.
Yes, that's the top grade hardware, and it's available in China. That's also true. But it doesn't cost $150. That's also padded. But then he adds up all these costs, saying that the total is $1,450. That sounds a bit steep to me because I was in Guangzhou last month. I've seen these top level fake Birkins that is way better than the one he's showing in the video.
So he goes to China too.
$500, made with real Togo and stainless steel. So I'm assuming his exaggeration is to sell his fakes or dupes at a 3x multiplier, leveraging a trend now. And that's kind of where the problem starts, because if you're gonna expose anything, if there's anything to expose, you better be accurate. And there's so many inaccuracies in this video that kind of makes me not to think much of this content. He also has a very accurate point where he says China has the skills and talent as well as the materials. That's absolutely true. But the problem is most of that talent is going to make fakes or dupes.
You know, where this video gets stuck for me, right, is that, you know, you have to understand that building the brand and its prestige, right, is what's very important, is what people are paying for. People are paying for the fact that I have an Hermes Birkin, right? So when you go ahead and just say, like, look, here's what the actual costs are, and I'll just make you a real Birkin bag without the brand name, right? Okay, it absolutely drops in value exponentially, because the problem is that you need that official marking and all of that stuff, right? You need that serial number, you need that stamp, you need all that things to be recognized for the prestige from other people, because that's what you're actually paying for. If not, once you start revealing, you know, what the cost of the items and whatever, and yet you still want to make 3x markup because Birkin itself makes, you know, something like 60x markup, right? So you still want to make like 3x markup because you're happy with that. It's you can't have it both ways. The moment you are making it with no brand or whatever, and it's just whatever your material costs plus your labor on top of it, you could only mark up a little bit on top of that for your troubles and stuff, right? That's about it. Once people know that's what's happening, then this thing, it should have been marketed at, like, I don't know, like $800 or $600 or it's just something like that. You really can't just go ahead and try. So he's pointing that out right now, that he's actually even lying and inflating the cost of, you know, the metal, the Togo and whatever, so that he could end up selling it to you for $1,000 even.
These known brands. In my opinion, why not? China is producing their own designs, own brands, using these beautiful hardware, beautiful material they have, with incredible skill they have, all I know and believe, and sell that bag for $500, which is very profitable in their cost structures. Believe me, I know. But the problem is why your option should be a dupe of a classic, iconic bag from a European brand. Why not these individuals make their own creations and offer that quality at a very affordable price point under their own brand name? That's the real challenge. I invite all.
Right, because that's never going to happen, right? Because when this was done at that time, they had to start off from scratch, right? And what that means is that when you think of the brands like Louis and Hermes and stuff, they're like 200-year-old brands. A lot of people don't know that. They go back way far, right? They're actually older than Chanel, actually. Okay, Chanel was actually much later. So old brands like Louis and Hermes, and I think Prada as well. But anyways, the point is that how did it start off? It started off with a little shop. And that's why it was so expensive, right? I remember Louis Vuitton actually started off with luggage. Anyways, the point is that you started off there so that it was all handmade, high price point and stuff like that. And now you're rolling and you gain popularity and stuff. This is going to take many, many years to build that kind of prestige, right? And what China is doing right now is, hey, it's made here. So it's probably like, shattered the image for like a lot of people. But ultimately, at the end of the day, still having that Hermes branding on it, right, says to other people, I dropped 30 grand on this. I dropped 60 grand on this. And that's what actually really, really matters. The fact that it's a really good bag, that's the least that they could do, right? Because I'm not just going to drop $60,000 on complete junk. So is it a really good bag at the end of the day? Absolutely, right? It is the top of quality. But the problem is that, value wise, if we're just talking about material and construction and all of that, it's definitely not worth $60,000, but it's the prestige, it's the flex that you're really paying for, So I think he should have been a little more conscious about that when talking about, like, why not just do your own? Because you needed 200 years to build that kind of prestige. That's why.
Chinese people.
You know what I mean? When you think of like other brands, right? Like Juicy Couture or like a Marc Jacob or whatever, they don't go for, $60,000, right? The latest like Tory Burch and stuff like that, they don't go for that high.
To take on in this trade war. I think that's the real meaning. I'm not here to judge anybody making fake bags, anybody buying or using fake bags, but here's what I think. Here's my understanding of the concept. And I think it should start with increasing the moral looseness that China has on some of these matters, because if you're going to make a video that's going to go viral and impact the world, it better be accurate, otherwise you're going to lose your credibility. Okay, so we're going to come back to Kim, and I just want to say that the video that we just watched before pretty much outs the Chinese guy who was talking about, like, all the Hermes stuff is made here as an actual bootlegger instead, right? So the issue is that are Hermes and, Louis and all the big brands technically actually made in China? Yeah, most likely they are. But was he specifically the one making Hermes bags or whatever? I think the other guy has exposed that it's probably not him. If anything, he's probably one of the bootleggers. Now, you got to keep in mind that as far as the fake stuff that's coming out of China or whatever, they are very, very well made. They're very, very close to the point where we call them A+ goods, right? Meaning that it's so similar, it's really difficult to tell. So if it wasn't because of, Tanner Leatherstein or whatever, I would never have been able to tell, like, okay, this is Togo, this is actually not Togo, because, I don't really follow this stuff. But let's get back to this video.
Okay, so this would be a whole new industry that's being opened up. Like, you can now travel to China, buy the goods, and bring them back as personal items, and then sell them in the United States for more. I don't know how feasible that is. I mean, I don't know how much a plane ticket is to China and how much you can actually bring back in personal items, but certainly this would encourage travel to China. This encourages people to go there, load up on goods, bring them back. Maybe people would go and get their own stuff, and whether they sell it or not, it does encourage tourism now to China. So that's kind of one of the backfires, I guess, that we could see from the tariff war. This last video I want to show you before we really break down what's happening and and whether or not this tariff or trade war is even going to work. This is a post from a Chinese national saying, you guys are all blaming China, you're blaming us, but it's really your own fault, and America now needs a revolution.
They rob you blind, and you thank them for it. That's a tragedy. That's a scam. That's why I'm saying this right now. Americans, you don't need a tariff. You need a revolution. For decades, your government and oligarchs only ship your job to China, not for diplomacy, not for peace, but to exploit cheap laborers. And in the process, they hollowed out your middle class, crushed your working class, and told you to be proud while they sold your future for profit. And yes, China made money, but we used it to build roads, lift millions out of poverty, fund healthcare, raise living standard. We reinvested in our people. My family also benefited from it. What did your oligarchs do?
I don't like this message at all, because you have to understand what happened during the Chinese Revolution, okay? And the horror stories that happened during the revolution. In order for a country to have a revolution, the people that will suffer, it's bad. It's really, really bad. I don't want to get into, like, you know, stories and specifics and stuff like that. You guys could read up on that yourself. But in order for any country to have a revolution, in order for radical change like that, right, there's a lot of suffering that needs to happen. Okay. I forget what the count is under Maoist China, but I think it's definitely north of 20 million deaths. It's definitely north of that. I would dare to say it's something like 50 million people died in order for the revolution to occur, you know, for change and stuff like that. I mean, were there positive things that actually came out of it? Well, think about it, right? Originally, China, people didn't all speak the same language because everybody was in different parts of China. So if you know anything about the Chinese language, we have a lot of different dialects. Now, pretty much China is unified in speaking Mandarin Chinese. But the thing is, how did that happen? During the revolution, what Mao did is that he just took, you know, families and towns and whatever, and just shook it all up, you know, and he just forced everybody to migrate into different parts of the country, so far apart that you basically can't find your way back. And then it forced everybody to unify under one language because you couldn't speak to each other. So now everybody had to learn, you know, one language and one language only, right? And Mandarin in Chinese actually translates to the national language. It's 国语. 国 means country, 语 means language, the country's language. So yeah, that's what happened during the revolution. The point is that while it's very good that everybody, you know, learned the same language and stuff like that, but 50 million people had to die for that to happen. What, like, did you have to do it that way? We couldn't have just like remandated schools and stuff to now you have to learn this language. Did we have to kill off everyone? Some people will argue, yes, you actually had to because there was just too much opposition and people had to, you know what I mean? It's crazy how that stuff happens. So for him to come back, you know, I'm personally an American patriot, right? Okay, I love this country, but for him to say something like that and try to induce, like, you know, hey, you need a revolution in your country, man, I'm very against it. That's not a cool statement at all.
They bought yachts, private jets, mansions with golf course driveways. They manipulate the market, dodge tax, and poured billions into endless wars. And you get stagnated wages, crippling healthcare cost, cheap dopamine, debt, and flagged wave property made in China while they pick your pocket.
Right. But you guys also need to do a quick research, right? That, what is it? In the United States, I believe the number was 70%. 70% of millionaires in the United States are self-made millionaires. Also, the United States has the most millionaires out of anyone in the world, like the population of billionaires. Okay. Now, don't do a whole, like, you know, this is the rich with the rich or whatever, because as I said, 70% are self-made millionaires in their own lifetime. So it wasn't passed down. It wasn't given to them or anything like that. People, if you're talking about like, pulling people out of poverty, that's one thing. But another thing to, excel beyond, just what you need and stuff, to become millionaires and whatever. The United States has the greatest population of it. So I wonder if he knows that stat before, talking this kind of smack.
For 40 years, both China and the United States benefit from the trade, the manufacturing, but only one of us use that wealth to build. This isn't China's fault. This is yours. You let this happen. You let the oligarchs feed you lies while they made you fat, poor, and addicted. Now they blame China for mess they made. I don't think so. I don't think you need another tariff.
No, see, here's the thing, right? When America first started, it was like a frontier country, right? Okay, there was nothing here. America built its own cities, its own skyscrapers, right? Founded the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that. There was an upwards momentum. That's what happened. Now, when you think about China from the as late as maybe 1980s and stuff, it was still very, very third world. It's super modern now. It is devastatingly, metroplex now for you guys who are like Transformer fans. Anyways, the point is that there is an upward momentum of building, right? Because China has to build, it has to catch up, and plus it's getting all this manufacturing jobs and stuff. It's just going to be a natural progression. So as China caught up during this era, that's why the cities are so modern. Right. But when you think about like during the Industrial Revolution and how, America has built itself up, right? Nobody's even close to something like that because the technology wasn't even there. But we are in a different technological age, and therefore China climbing all the way up. So the thing is that should another country be technically kind of third world, but now they have investments, they have, a chance to catch up or whatever, and we are in a next, even more advanced, right? In a nano age, et cetera, as we progress further. If they have the momentum to build up, there will be the next metropolis on top because, every single setup is like this. Every single country is like this. Once it gets built up or whatever, sure, everything is an up and down curve, right? So right now, the United States, because we outsource so much of our production over to China, and in order to do so, we also had to share exactly how we make stuff over to China, to the point where they kind of overdid it and we don't make stuff here anymore. And the problem is that because we don't make stuff here anymore, we don't remember how to make stuff here anymore because we don't train them. All the old guys who were engineers, the CNC guys, all the tooling guys, all the factory production or whatever, they're not here anymore because they've been poached over to China in order to teach them how to make all those things. And then they never came back here. Why? Because we don't produce anything here, so there's no jobs for them over here. So they expat themselves over to the other country, they get poached over, and now we have to slowly try to bring them back. But the problem is that like we've been enjoying a lot of low-cost goods and stuff. So in order to try to bring them back, in the meantime, it's going to be a price shock, to say the least. I wonder if this guy's done. I really don't want to look at this guy anymore. Okay, he's done in like 2 seconds.
You need to wake up. You need to take your country back.
Man, this is
a revolution.
This is an instigating.
No, he has a point. We've been hearing for years now that China is cheating, that they've rigged the system, broken the rules, stolen their way to prosperity. You'll hear terms like forced technology transfers, intellectual property theft, state subsidies, dumping, currency manipulation, and yes, these are serious issues. But if we really want to understand what happened over the last 30 years, why America lost millions of good-paying jobs, why our infrastructure is collapsing, why theirs is rising, why China now leads the world in manufacturing EVs and high-speed rail, we need to look past the slogans and ask the uncomfortable question, is China really cheating, or did our own elites simply sell us out?
What she's about to say next, I wholeheartedly agree with. That's what actually happened. I don't believe, as a world power, anybody twisted America's arm in order to do anything. Think about that, right? If you believe the United States is the greatest nation, if you believe at least that we have the strongest military than any other country in the world. Excuse me, how did we get bullied out of like, bad deals, et cetera, all that stuff? I mean, it's one thing to say that, the leaders who signed deals and stuff got outwitted, but to say bullied, strong-armed or something like that's a bit much, right? So I don't like that rhetoric at all, that China's been doing bad deals and they've been taking advantage of us. Like, what are you talking about? At the time where everything shifted from made in Taiwan over to made in China, how did they bully you? How did they take advantage of you, right? You wanted a third world country, right, with good work ethics, a lot of land to produce your stuff for lower cost so that you could bring it back to your citizens over here so that we could enjoy stuff for lower cost. And China said, I'll do it. How is that taking advantage? You know what I mean? Now, if you're going to go into a long diatribe of like economics and things that just go over people's heads or whatever, that I don't know what to tell you. I guess I suppose so, because I don't even understand what you're saying. But to just go off on the rhetoric and just say like, when China was the producer at the time, right, before they were as modern and advanced as they are now, where they were just, starting to take over production in the late 90s into the 2000s. And, they were taking advantage of this whole time. Because that's a bit much, man. Like, I don't believe
for years, foreign companies wanting to access to the Chinese market had to partner with Chinese firms and share their proprietary technology. That's called a forced technology transfer. Critics say this gave China an unfair advantage. But let's be honest, no one was forced. Western firms wanted a slice of the biggest market on earth. They willingly traded tech for profits. And China said, we'll let you in, but you have to teach us how to build. And we said, yes.
Right, because how am I supposed to produce for you if you don't teach me how? And then as a result of that, organically, China learned how to make stuff. And if you make stuff all the time, you get better at it. And then you say, hey, let me put my spin on things or whatever, because now I understand how to do tooling. I know how to innovate. I know how to, right? Because I make this stuff every single day. I bet you if you made like, a ballpoint pen or some chopsticks or whatever for the past 20 years or whatever, you're going to make a better chopstick or ballpoint pen than you did starting from day one, right? And that's exactly what has progressed.
Over and over and over again, because our CEOs weren't thinking 20 years ahead. They were thinking about their next quarterly earnings call. Yes, there's IP theft, there's hacking, there's state support.
A business has to think a little more short-sighted than what people think, right? Because they got to pay their workers. They got to pay, you know what I mean? We got to keep the lights on first. So we got to make sure that this is currently sustainable before we move on to the long-term. So what ended up happening 20 years later, 30 years later, that like China is very advanced right now, right, is I would say it's kind of sort of unforeseeable, because every single company doing this, they're not one company, it's a collective of companies. So I'm doing it, you're doing it, they're doing it, and then we all collectively helped out another country inadvertently. You know what I mean? Like this wasn't the goal, this wasn't the plan, but hey, you're getting your stuff made over there, well, I want to get my stuff made over there, and then let's all make money off of this, right? Honestly, I feel as if like this is just what happened and nobody saw it coming.
But let's not pretend we're innocent. The U.S. runs its own espionage operation.
I also want to say at the time, China was a poor country who just wanted work. You want something made? We'll do it. End of story, right? It wasn't like, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to, try to win the bid so that we can learn how to make all those American things. And then 30 years later, we're going to get them back. I don't think it was like as conspiratory and nefarious as that in the beginning. I think it was just very simple, right? We wanted to lower the prices of our goods, and it actually made sense to have them made overseas and sent back to us. Because normally when you think about like production, right? If the production costs here wasn't that much more expensive than over there, then it would cost you even more to ship, everything over there, or have stuff made and then ship over here. Like it would be the same thing. So what's the point? I might as well just make it here, right? But if it's significantly lower so that I'm totally incentivized to have stuff produced over there and then start creating a supply chain over, then that's different. And who was willing to do it? China said, I'm willing to do it. End of story.
We've interfered in governments around the world. And when it comes to subsidies, the U.S. subsidizes agriculture, defense, oil and gas, Wall Street bailouts, and now tech firms under the CHIPS Act. We don't admit it. China does it openly because their system, the economy serves the nation. In our system, the economy serves shareholders. Currency manipulation? Well, that was true 20 years ago, but not anymore. China's actually spent the last decade propping up its currency to maintain stability. And non-tariff barriers, yes, China plays protectionist games, but so does everyone else, including us. We ban chip sales, restrict Huawei, embargo countries, and rewrite financial regulations to serve American interests.
Right, every country does this.
The reality is this. China didn't steal our prosperity. Our own elites gave it away. They pushed for China's entry into the WTO. They offshored factories, dismantled unions, and told American workers to learn to code.
Well, the thing is that, like, for any business, right, cutting costs is always the most profitable way of making money. I've said this before, right? Because money unspent is not taxable. So earning $4,000 and retaining $4,000 is two different monies, okay? Earning $4,000, you're still going to be taxed on top of that, so you don't get the whole $4,000. But $4,000 that you already made now, you're not spending, is $4,000 retained, right? That is gold. That is literally money in the bank, as opposed to, you know, $4,000 of possible accounts receivable, right? So when what she's saying over here, you know, it's something that it was going to be a natural progression in my mind, right? If somebody else is getting their stuff produced overseas and then I see it and now they're undercutting our prices, and I'm like, how are they doing this? It's because they're getting their stuff made overseas. So, well, we got to hop on this. How much are they undercutting us by? Well, they get it made for pennies on the dollar, right? They get it for 20 times cheaper. I'm just making up numbers right now, right? At the time. So you would actually do this as well. And then this is just, you know, the, man, I hate to be all Thanos about this, but this is kind of inevitable when you think about it, right?
The steel towns collapsed. The textile mills vanished. The auto parts industry got hollowed out. But the Dow Jones hit record highs, and that's all that mattered. And what did China do with its surplus?
But it only takes one company from every single industry to really start a chain reaction, right? Let's just say we all sell sneakers, okay? You're Adidas, you're Nike, you know what I mean? I'm Puma, whatever. It only takes one of us to say, let's go get our Pumas made, you know, overseas, right? And now you Nike and you Adidas or whatever, what are you going to do about it? Suddenly, you know, Pumas are making a killing right now, right? And we're able to do so much more. Like, for instance, let's say we're all selling our brand name sneakers at like $100 even, right? But the big problem is this: while yours were produced at $40, my Pumas are made at $4. So what do I do with that extra $36 discrepancy? I could put that all into more advertising, and now my Pumas are advertising way harder than Nike's ever could because you don't have the budget for it. So immediately, like, wait, what is Puma doing? We got to hop on this, right? So now you found factories also overseas to get your stuff also made at $4 so that you could, you know, maintain the race against me, so that you don't lose your spot in the industry that you've already dedicated your whole life and resources and infrastructure to, right? So in my opinion, when you look at it from that kind of lens, this is inevitably going to happen. And now the third world country who's making all these sneakers or whatever has what? They've unlocked sneaker technology, because we're going to send our sneaker creators or whatever over there to show them how it's done, right? We're going to set up the proper machines for them. We're going to maybe even, you know, ship over different kind of like Brother or Juki sewing machines and stuff to get them set up, right? And then once we teach them how to do this so that they can make stuff up to American standards, they have it now. But there's no choice in avoiding that.
It didn't hand out stock buybacks. It didn't pump the money into speculative finance. It built high-speed rail, smart cities, new energy grids, entire industries from scratch. And what did we do?
Why not?
Well, we built financial bubbles. We gutted public schools. We defunded infrastructure. We gave tax cuts to the ultra wealthy and told.
Right, because what happens with, you know, progression and stuff like that, right, is that, look, China was a third world country, and now they built things up, And then, I'm going to build a skyscraper here, a skyscraper there. We have the latest technologies to do it. And then that's what it's going to look like. The earliest skyscrapers, when you think about like the World Trade Center, Empire State Building, and all that stuff, right? Super old architecture now. But at the time, they were, marvels in itself. And that's exactly what's going to happen. But once everything is built up, your properties are all filled or whatever, people are going to start, enjoying the prosperity, right? And when you start enjoying the prosperity, you start to stagnate a little bit, and then you start to, focus on other stuff because you've already done the growth things for so long, right? And this is exactly what happens. So America was sitting pretty, right? And then let's go ahead and move everything overseas for the production over there so that we can make even more money. So so once you got all your infrastructure up to a point where you're very comfortable, let's just make more money now rather than build.
Told everyone else to tighten their belts. And now we think tariffs are going to fix this? Tariffs are like putting duct tape on a collapsing bridge. They raise prices, disrupt supply chains, and they invite retaliation. They don't build new factories. They don't create a workforce. They don't fix our broken system. At best, they're a pause button. But we don't need a pause. We need a reset. The only way forward is to rebuild this country from the ground up.
Okay, I do understand rebuilding this country from the ground up, but I do want to say, right, the tariffs, right, it's not that simple of how tariffs work, okay? Tariffs, it's a way for the country to make money, but what's also very important, right, is as far as the tariff goes, is that like you want to have a guided route. So you want the combination of both tariffs and to incentivize countries to build their factories over here. That's exactly how we have Honda and Toyota factories over here, right? That's exactly how, we're going to get, I think they got Hyundai to invest like 500 billion or something here, right? And they're going to start by investing in, I think it's either steel or aluminum factory over in Georgia so that we don't need the metal that's coming from Canada as much. I saw that in an article somewhere. But the point is, right, it's a combination of both the tariff plus incentivizing people coming over. In our next episode, I'm going to talk about exactly how China did the exact same thing with incentivizing people so that they poached a lot of factory owners to come over. And that's how China industrialized.
That means a national industrial policy, one that actually names strategic sectors and invests in them long term. That means infrastructure on the scale of the New Deal, not pothole patchwork. It means vocational training, apprenticeships, and skilled labor being treated with the respect it deserves. It means breaking up the monopolies, punishing offshoring.
I don't know specifically about vocational whatever, because what happened is that all of the people who used to produce stuff here, right, all the engineers and stuff, they got shipped over by the large companies and say, go teach them how to make stuff over there. That way we could bring the costs down by a lot, right? See, the way that factories work in China is that they got nothing but land and people. There's a lot of people there, right? So one of the ways to keep something, very, very efficient is to have it running all the time. So all of the factories in China actually sort of run 24 hours. They would just go ahead and hire enough people to work in 3 shifts. So like 8-hour shifts each, and then just constantly rotate them. So the machines, the lights, the facility, it never stops. It never ends. You know what I mean? They're just constantly pumping out stuff. So, and that's how they bring the costs down as far as, the time, the rent, the facility, like all that stuff. So that like when it boils down, that's how you produce a $4 pair of Nikes, right? So, what she's saying over here, yeah, I agree with most of it, but some of the stuff, I think you need to be an importer. You need to go overseas and see how stuff is made to really understand the backstory.
Banning stock buybacks and rewarding companies that build here, hire here, and stay here. But instead of doing that, instead of focusing on America, what are we doing? We're talking about war with Iran.
Yeah, so the whole vocational thing, right? So they sent the engineers over there to teach the workers directly. And then from there, the workers teach the workers. So I don't know what she means by vocational, because in America, you're usually talking about vocational schools, right? Like going to, School of Aeronautics, going to Apex Tech, Lincoln Tech or something. So that's a vocational school. You're going there specifically to learn an occupation, to learn a skill, right? To learn a trade. So while that is very important to start off a generation from scratch so that they do something, but it's another thing where companies are heavily invested, right? So the will of the company will send their engineers over here as expats over here, and then, hands-on teach whoever is hired from scratch, and then, get the ball rolling right away, as opposed to slowly over time, academically, let people choose this career path and stuff like that. I think what she's saying, while important, is just slower than a company like, I don't know, Nike or Apple or whatever, sending their engineers over there, a whole team, like 20, 30 of them, to go train a fleet of like 3,000 people, right? So they'll train the first batch of people, and then they'll have people, oversee other people, and then everybody learns exactly what the trade is. I feel as if that is way faster, because a company is going to want results instantly, because every quarter matters to them. So they're going to make this happen in like a year, like 6 months to a year, versus vocational training and schools and stuff like that. You're talking about, putting children through the system before they come out, with the skills that they need.
We're dropping bombs on Yemen. We're spending billions, waging proxy wars on behalf of a foreign government, while our own cities look like war zones. We're pushing endless military aid packages, inflaming global tensions, and marching toward another conflict that has nothing to do with the American people and everything to do with the interests of defense contractors and their lobbyists. And when we're not trying to start a war, we're fantasizing about expanding our empire, making Canada a U.S. state, buying Greenland, stationing troops on every continent, guarding pipelines and mineral routes, while our own border is a disaster and our veterans sleep in tents.
Okay, I don't want to digress. I think we're going to stop it here, but just real quick, the whole Greenland thing and the Canada stuff or whatever, that's because as technology gets more and more advanced, a lot of the larger world powers believe that the next war or fight or whatever, you will be blindsided because it will come from the Arctic. Okay, so having Greenland, having Canada, if your nation is a world power where you have no choice but to expand, right, then you have to protect yourself. Just like how, Israel has like the Iron Dome because it has a lot of missiles fired upon itself. So, you need to protect yourself in some way. Even if you don't attack other people, you need to protect yourself in some way. So, the United States does this by strategically having bases everywhere. We have more bases than any other country in the world. I don't know if you guys know that, but let's come back up to the top real quick. Okay, so yeah, guys, this is going to be a part one of talking about the tariffs. I know it gets sidetracked a little bit. We talked a little bit about the purses and all that other stuff, but episode 2 is going to go into a lot more anecdotal stories of what is happening to people in the country right now, and to have a better understanding of exactly what happens with production and stuff like that, and basically my background behind all of this stuff, as well as the final verdict on the pricing and how the prices are going up and what's happening to my goods, as well as when we order stuff and things like that. A lot more to come in the second episode, guys, because this one's dragging out for too long, so I had to be a 2-part series. So this one will be released Monday, and then I'll do another one that'll be released Tuesday, and then we'll get back to the regular schedules. Anyways, guys, that is today's video. If you enjoyed that, please give it a like, and if you learned something, please consider subscribing. As always, guys, I'll see you guys in the next. Take care.